Welcome to the show, Gearheads. We just watched Lando Norris put on a Verstappen-like dominant victory over Max Verstappen at the Dutch Grand Prix. This Jon Massengale, joined by Mr. Bob Varsha, and shortly by Chris Medland from Zandfoort. Mr. Varsha, this was a very dominant victory after a very poor start, actually, by Lando Norris.
Yeah, biggest margin of victory for the year when you're in the same race as Max Verstappen and Red Bull. That's saying something. Bad start for McLaren. Originally, it was put down to wheel spin. Excuse me. Actually, I think the clutch had too much bite. They just didn't have enough revs to outrun not only Max Verstappen, but George Russell. So both of the McLaren drivers lost a spot at the start. But as champions do, they came back, particularly Lando Norris, who was having none of the legend of Max Verstappen on home soil in one of the greatest Formula One cars of all time. He got back past him, proved that, at least on this day, the McLaren-Mercedes combination was easily the fastest car at track, at least in his hands.
Yeah.
Solid pit work. Not the most exciting race, any of the passing, and there was a good amount of passing, but most of it was DRS supported, which is not a bad thing necessarily. I remain just totally entranced by this racetrack. I just couldn't wait for the next camera cut because everywhere you look, it was cool watching these cars perform on this tight and twisty environment. As usual, big winners and big losers. McLaren, I don't think personally is going to challenge Max Verstappen for the driver's title, but they are certainly a major threat in the Constructors' Championship, which, as we all know, is the one that pays all the money. And I think we saw a graphic example today of what a number two driver, if you will, can mean to a team. I mean, McLaren put two cars in the top four. Sergio Perez was sixth, Max Verstappen second. Red Bull loses 8 points to McLaren in the Constructors' Championship, and that's down to a 30-point gap with 9 races to go. They desperately need Sergio Perez to hoist himself up in the points, or that 1-2 punch of Norris and Piastri at McLaren might just sneak that title out from under Red Bull.
Yeah, and you're right. I think that, Checo finishing sixth today is a big move. But just going back to the victory by the gap by Lando and coming back, like you said, like champions do. But I tell you what, today the car was just stellar for McLaren. I mean, the difference in speed in that car, because it did not take long for Lando to get back. But once he did, it was the real telling thing. Once he did, he just took off from Max. And it looks like the Red Bull is it looks like the Red Bull's just not very good on its tires right now, because Max started complaining just almost immediately after the pit cycle there, and just could not close the gap to Lando Norris at all. So it seems like a balance or tire deg issue with Red Bull right now.
Well, and it shows once again how critical the tires are to a car's performance. I mean, recall Canada, I believe it was, where they left Oscar Piastri out a lap or two too long, and his race was basically destroyed by it. Same thing here, roughly. They left Piastri out a couple of laps longer than Norris. He was beaten on the pit stop by Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari and was never able to recover. It can be that close. If you just lose that little bit of pace on tires that are past their prime, and then you come in and got a solid pit stop. I think Ferrari on balance was quicker, but he just couldn't get back around and had to busy himself with traffic and so on. So there's a lot going on, a lot for the teams to chew on, and they have to do it quickly because Monza comes up next weekend, and that is a whole different sandwich than Zandvoort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But speaking of Zandvoort and what you said, I'm so glad you said that about watching this race, because it is such a different track with those banked curves, and it's a really exciting addition to the calendar. What's this, the fourth year it's been back now? So It's been a
Yep.
it's a really great addition. But talking of Max Verstappen, right? So racing at home like this, and I know he's not happy, but he did not win the race, and he got soundly trounced by 20 seconds. But as soon as he looks at he doesn't have to look. As soon as he thinks about the drivers' championship, he's going to be happy because at this rate, you alluded to it,
Yeah.
but at this rate, there's just no way that McLaren is going to catch them. I mean, Lando's going to catch him because it's going to take a lot more than just winning and beating Max by one position. He's going to have to beat him by a lot, either DNFs by Max or some other teams like Mercedes or Ferrari or somebody stepping up in between, including Piastri. You got to say Piastri did a good job, but I think Max is just so hard to. He just brings so much more than just the car, right? He can squeezes every ounce out of a car.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, look at the reliability of these cars. I mean, Max dropped out of the very first race of the year in Melbourne. Sorry, no, that was in Bahrain, but he dropped out of round 3, I think it was, in Australia. But that was the only mechanical for Verstappen this year. And that's the kind of thing that's important. Consistency in winning championship. If you can't win the race, take second. If you can't do that, take third. Take whatever the race will give you. And I think we heard that from Max in his comments after the race. He just waved goodbye to Lando Norris, who disappeared over the horizon. And, he said, well, today all I had was second. So I took it.
Yeah. And we got to talk about the start of the race because you mentioned the clutch, right? And you think that's what it was. I don't know. Have you heard that for sure? I haven't heard any official update.
No.
Maybe. And when Chris joins us, maybe he might be able to get with
when
Zach.
we went to when we heard the onboard, the replays from the onboard, you heard the McLaren when the clutch bit, it just went
bog.
And it was almost like he was in second gear or something. He just didn't get the revs he needed. Whereas Max did and got away better.
Yeah, that's such a huge part of a launch, right? Getting the clutch slip just right to bring the engine revs up, and then gradually bite. So if you get it wrong, but wow, it was a huge jump by Max because of that. I've got the stat right here. We tweeted it out, but I think it was here it is. The 0 to 200 kilometers was 5.23 for Verstappen and 5.64 for Norris. And believe me, I watched that 0 to 200 gap. That is a huge gap. 4.1, tenths.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a huge gap.
Yeah, and it wasn't down to the drivers because they had, we were told, identical reaction times.
Yes.
Norris and Verstappen. So, if in a drag race, nobody won the tree, but the acceleration was there in the Red Bull.
Yeah. I've got some quotes from Max Verstappen. I grabbed some of his team radio screenshots, and he was saying, I can't go faster. The car doesn't respond to my inputs. That's what I was alluding to earlier, is that this was on lap 28, right before the pit stop. And he was just saying, the car doesn't respond to my inputs. And you and I both know what that means. That's tires, right? His tires were just gone. And not only that, after the pit stops, he could not even touch Lando. So, and it looks like Chris Medland has joined us from Zandfoort. Chris, we were just talking about the dominance of Lando Norris. It was pretty incredible to watch today.
I heard you mentioned tires there, and I'll rejoin the call given the fact before we went off air pre-race, I said, I reckon everyone was and nobody did. For the reason being, I mean, look, Lewis doing the first stint on the softs at least.
Hey, Chris.
As long as most people on the mediums.
We're losing you, but you're dropping out pretty good. You may have to wander towards some Wi-Fi or something, but I know what you're saying. Chris is fessing up to saying, hey, everybody's going to start on soft tires, and they all started on mediums. But that's
exactly what I said. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I neglected to look at the information from Pirelli, which told us who had how many sets of new tires available for the race. And a lot of cars, including both Red Bulls, had no fresh sets of red tires, the softest tires. So they pretty much were forced to go with the mediums. And it turns out, as Chris just said, the entire top 10 on the grid were all on the medium tire.
Yeah, and speaking of tires, Lando Norris must have had a ton left in his tires at the end of the race, because did you see his final lap? His final lap, because I tweeted out that Lando had won by 21 seconds. Well, he won by 22 point something, and then got fastest lap and tacked on another point there at the end of the race. So he had a blistering fast, final lap of the race.
Well, that
yeah, those
lap
are
right now actually came Lewis Hamilton, who was on soft tires, and to then radioing and saying, "Is the fastest lap okay?" And he was told, "Yes." He said, "Do you need me to go again on the final lap to draw?" And they said, "Negative. We don't." The Mercedes didn't know McLaren had, and told Hamilton that his fastest lap was safe. Pipped it by, I think it was 7,000 seconds. So I think the Mercedes probably thought on the soft tire they had that pace, that lap in, and had no idea that McLaren on such old hard tires.
Yeah, Chris, we're still losing a little bit of your transmission there, so I don't know if you can check your location, but look, I think what this boils down to is that McLaren has now solidified the fact that their upgrades have been phenomenal. The car is amazing, and they are going to give Red Bull a serious run for the money for the Constructors' Championship. I mean, it kind of looks inevitable at this point, but we don't, the Drivers' Championship is a whole nother story. But guys, you know what? Let's take a quick break and reset here at the top of the hour, and we'll be back right after these messages. Yeah, Chris.
That's weird, because you guys are crystal clear for me.
It's doing. Remember that it did this about 3 races ago, where we could hear you perfectly. It just drops a syllable. But maybe give me a countdown from 10. It sounds like it may be better. Let's try.
Sure. 10, 8, 7, 6, 5, 3, 2, 1.
We lost the 10 and the 5. So I don't know. Maybe
how weird.
Did you jump off and then jump back on the last time to fix that?
I'm not sure, but I can right now.
Yeah, try that while we're in the break.
It's almost like a wavelength problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good analogy, the way it drops and drops.
Yeah, almost methodic or metronomically.
Let's see what we got on YouTube. Wow, lots of comments already here. That was impressive, Joe of Oyster Bay says. I thought Oscar could get by Chuck, but no dice, he said. Yeah, yep. Kevin Kelly, that was rather awesome. That sounds kind of, there's a movie from the 80s that's reminding me of.
How about now? Should I do another countdown?
Yeah, do a countdown.
10, 9, 8, 6, 5, 4, 3, 1.
We lost the 7 and the 2.
Oh.
It is a wavelength thing.
It's not even... 68.
We're still losing you. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on.
Well, just talk between the holes, Chris.
Yeah. Oh, Todd Dauber says, just amazing how McLaren has come on. Yes, it's really exciting, and no one more excited than Andy P. Coming back.
Hello to everyone. This is Gunther Steiner. This is Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, welcome back. We're talking about Lando Norris's dominant victory today over Max Verstappen and the rest of the field. And I can just run down real quick in case you haven't heard the entire position here. We got Lando Norris with the win, followed by Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, Carlos Sainz, Checo Perez down in 6th. A nice improvement for him. And then followed by the 2 Mercedes, George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. Nice recovery for Lewis Hamilton. Followed by Pierre Gasly, Alonso in 10th, Hulkenberg in 11th, Daniel Ricciardo 12th, Lawrence Stroll, Lance Stroll, Albon, Ocon, Logan Sargent in 16th, Yuki Tsunoda 17th, K-Mag in 18th, and at the back, Bottas and Zhou Guanyu. And we do have Bob Varsha with me, Jon Massengale, and Chris Medland. And Chris is trying to work on his connection so we can try to get some interviews. But Bob, what else? I just ran down.
Trying every.
It's still dropping out, Chris. I don't know what's going on. I think it's a wavelength thing, like Bob said. Bob, what else? What strikes you today? I mean, I talked about Checo Perez at being, an important 6th finish, which is not probably where he should be, but it's better than where he was. Anything else jump out at you?
Well, yeah, I think I want to sing the praises of Lando Norris a little bit more. Remember, we talked in the pre-race show about how he just seems to be so down on himself all the time that, I'm not driving like a world champion. I don't deserve this, yada, yada, yada. I think today he drove like a world champion by comparison to his teammate, Oscar Piastri, who we know is really quick. And yet Lando was able to draw away from Max Verstappen and the Red Bull and everybody else in the race for that matter. And I suspect a lot of that had to do with preserving his tires. So being able to pull away while preserving the rubber, setting fast lap of the race on your very last lap to the checkered flag. Meanwhile, Piastri, got caught on the pit stop rotation, dropped back, and was trying to deal with Charles Leclerc and couldn't do it. He kept losing ground. I don't know if he took too much out of his tires or what it was, but he came up, just a little bit short in terms of the tools in his toolbox to try to knock the Ferrari off the podium. But he wasn't able to do it. And Lando was. I mean, he was just imperious. So I certainly hope to see a little bit of swagger from Lando Norris next week in Monza. Maybe Zak Brown can give him enough attaboys that he'll realize that he really is a major factor in this championship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were talking about Piastri.
Now, I'm not sure how my signal is holding now, but if
still dropping
enough, I just wanted to throw a question today, which was what their reaction was when Lando lost. I want to know what everyone thought, and you guys.
Okay, we
when
lost.
Lando lost the lead off the top.
Yeah.
Okay. Chris wants to know our reaction.
The temptation was.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Well, the temptation was to say, well, there you go. Same old Lando takes pole, loses it at the first corner, and that's, the last we see of him on the top step. But that's not what happened. And in fact, it's been a bit of a plague in Formula One. It's been quite a while since the pole sitter won the race, and that includes everybody who has taken poles in the last half dozen or so races.
Yeah, good point. Good point. And honestly, my reaction, Chris, was I expected Lando to come back, but I didn't expect the come back and win by 22 seconds. But I did expect Lando to come back, and I was quickly looking for those stats because I was thinking, how bad was the reaction? We're talking about spinning on the television broadcast, spinning of the tires. I'm glad you caught that sound of the engine bogging, Bob, because I didn't realize that's what that was. Because when you hear that bog, you know that it's the clutch. Because if the tires had been spinning, you would have heard the opposite. You would have heard maybe even the rev limiter. So,
right.
So yeah. But yeah, Chris, to answer directly, yes, I thought that Lando would come back and make it a race, if not win. But I just didn't expect that insane dominance. So, yeah. What else, Bob? I'm looking at the big movers, right? So Lewis Hamilton up 6 positions, Carlos Sainz up 5 positions, and the big losers, Yuki Tsunoda down 6, and Lance Stroll down 5. I think those were the two biggest. Yeah, those are the two biggest drops. So.
Yeah, good day for Ferrari. Recall they qualified fairly miserably. But they were able to get a lot done in the race with Leclerc finishing 3rd and Sainz in 5th, particularly Sainz, who started way back in the teens. Ferrari, I think, really, stemmed the bleeding there for a while.
Yeah, because Leclerc did make up 3
Well
positions
said.
too. So yeah, you're right. I mean, that's a really good day for
Yeah.
Ferrari, especially all things considered right now that they're, the pace of the car. You talked about the pace of Piastri and Leclerc, right? Did Piastri, you know, damage his tires trying to catch up and riding behind a car like that? His tires were they were 9 laps newer than Leclerc's. He was on 39 laps.
Right.
And Leclerc at 48.
Yep.
So great job by Leclerc. Just reiterating what you said.
Mm-hmm.
And the other
good job by Alex Albon coming up to 14th from the very back.
Yeah, he was in the points at one point. He got all the way to 10th.
Yeah, he got to 10th.
Yeah, and you kind of called that.
Wasn't far off on that one.
Yeah, you called that in the pre-show, thinking where Albon could move up to, and Sargent moved up 2 positions, and Albon moved up 5. So that's kind of that's actually exactly what you predicted, spot on there. And just looking at like driver situations, Ricardo finishing 12th and his teammate finishing 5 positions down in 17th. Do we know what happened with Yuki Tsunoda? Did you see, was it an incident, Bob, of any kind?
No.
Because there were hardly any incidents at all during the entire race.
Yeah, and what there were, television didn't pick up on very quickly. We kept seeing stewards' commentary across the top of the screen saying, the incident between this driver and that driver was noted. And I thought, well, we didn't see it, so it's kind of hard to judge. And a couple of them they managed to find back in the video room. But I think there was a good bit that happened, as inevitably it does in a televised race, that you don't get to see because, television cameras were pointed elsewhere, which is just part of the challenge of TV. But no, I don't know what held Yuki Tsunoda back.
He did have...
But credit Danny Rick for getting up to 12th.
Yeah, I'm looking at pit stops. Yuki, and I took this screenshot after the race, so I think Yuki had 2. Let me go and check and see. Kevin Kelly on YouTube was saying he had 3 pit stops. That would have do it for sure. I'm just trying to confirm that. But yeah. Hey, we got Chris Medland back. Let's give him a mic check. Chris? Chris, hey, I'll answer. Let me answer what your question right before you dropped off a second ago. You asked us and everybody on YouTube, and Andy P says that he said, oh no, here we go again when Lando had a bad start. So, but yeah, how's your mic, buddy?
Hopefully it's slightly better. Any better, or are we dropping out again?
It's better.
No,
Yay!
Wow, who'd have thought it? Well, I'll admit, I had a similar reaction. I thought it would be really tough to overtake round here. I thought, as I said, pre-race, that the advantage that McLaren had would probably not be as big in race trim, and that it would be tough to find a way past Verstappen on track, maybe through strategy, but that he would basically sit there, put pressure on, but wouldn't be able to get past easily. And, well, clearly I was wrong, as I was with the strategy, as I was with my top 3 picks. So basically, never listen to a word I ever say.
What do we have you on this show for, Medland? What's going on?
Half the time, you can't even hear me anyway.
Hey, Chris, speaking of can't hear you, give us your eyes and ears of what's happening around you now. Yesterday, when we were getting off the air, a giant thunderstorm. And now we can't hear him at all.
That's my bad for connecting to a Wi-Fi network accidentally.
Okay.
I'm back.
Okay. What's happening now at Zandfoort?
It's absolutely rammed. Anyone who's listening to the pre-race show, I explained how we have like the paddocks. That means everybody who is a VIP guest has come from beneath the under the podium, headed back, and they've all walked. And there's a queue to even get into the paddock. I'm making my way back to where the driver. I can see Oscar Piastri chatting with Pierre on F1 TV right now, and let's see if we can speak to, because one had a good day, one quite a frustrating one.
I hate to tell you this, Chris,
Agreed.
I think when you connected to that Wi-Fi and unconnected it, messed up your connection because you're dropping again. Darn it. Maybe drop off and get Piastri if you have to, but yeah, your connection's doing that again.
Well,
but
take what we can get.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think all of the TV pictures of that racetrack. Maybe I've been doing this too long. I looked down on those, mobs and mobs of people and thought, oh boy, it's going to be heck getting out of this place today. Which is a shame because it was just a brilliant day for all the folks who went to Zandvoort. And keep in mind now everybody's got to pack up and be in Monza in just a couple of days. But I think McLaren will be spending some time celebrating this one.
Yeah, and hopefully the Haas F1 team will be packing up, or at least packing up and then putting it on trucks because we don't know if that's been confirmed, that payment.
Yeah, we already know that McLaren has more sponsors than anybody else in the pit lane. But at one point, they showed the back of the McLaren garage where there's a little bit of a gallery for VIP guests to stand around and watch the crew at work. And it was packed. It was so busy in there.
Yeah.
I thought fire marshals in the United States would never let you get away with that, having all those people packed in there.
Yeah, McLaren picked up another big sponsor, and they actually, I'm looking to see who it was because what happened was this big sponsor. I thought, oh, that's a big name. I'm trying to remember who it was, but they didn't have room on the F1 team, so they had to move them to their F1 Academy team. I think. Let's see if I can find who that was, but they've got so many sponsors.
Great problem to have.
Oh, it was MasterCard. That's who it was. And, well, no, that wasn't it. That was another one. That was a month ago or so. But yeah, they have so many sponsors, man. It's by far the biggest and by far the biggest American sponsors is Formula One. I mean, is McLaren always. Hey, I want to talk about a pit stop. We had a 4.4 second stop for Checo Perez. And my tweet was, man, that is not helping his cause. And he still finished sixth today. But that just stands out. I didn't see what was wrong with it. But, man, that was a huge, in Formula One, that is an ugly pit stop, actually.
Yeah, it was.
I was just looking at the gap. The gap to Sainz was 7.5 seconds. So, not a game changer for Checo. But,
yeah. But Sainz has to be pretty frustrated. I mean, this weekend he managed to, as I said, staunch the bleeding and get what he could out of the race. But boy, he was back foot from the very beginning of Friday. Just nothing was going his way.
Your driver of the day, no surprise here. I suppose you could consider it a surprise, and it's Lando Norris, because
I do consider it a surprise.
I mean, yes, I was thinking when you start first and finish first, but considering the fact that he, it actually goes both ways. He had a bad start and then dominated after that. But yeah, he had 24% of the vote.
Yeah, you think Max would be hard to beat on home soil. He didn't win the race, but he drove hard, drove well, and, picked up second place points. But I guess all of his fans were in the grandstands and nobody could call in to vote.
All right. Well, Chris Medland did catch up with Oscar Piastri. So let's hear this interview with Oscar.
Oscar, P4 for you today. I will admit, I didn't think you were going to pass George quickly when you came out of the pits, but you flew through there. Did you then think that the podium was on?
Yes, I did. But I could tell once I got to within about 2 seconds of Charles that it wasn't going to be quite the same story as when I got past George. It worked with one car, but not quite the other. So we'll try again next weekend.
Does it feel, though, that you've got a car now that can be fighting for the win at every race? If anything, are you a little bit frustrated not leave here with a trophy?
Yes. I think, this weekend was just not as strong as it needed to be, really, for myself. Clearly the car's got a lot of pace, so I will try to make sure I capitalise on that a bit better. But yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty fun second part of the year for us.
We'll look forward to it. Thanks for your time, mate.
Here we go. All right. So, Chris, we got your mic again. Let's see how it's working. That was Oscar sounded upbeat, of course, right?
Going to be a fun end to the season. That was tough to ask him that question when you know it's not. But he had to scoot off very quick. Happy to grab him.
Oh, well, still dropping, Chris. I'm sorry, buddy. I don't know what's going on with our technology today, but you know what? Let's go ahead and take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue to break down the Dutch Grand Prix right after this. Hey, Chris, why don't you drop again and we'll try it and we'll see what the boys are saying on YouTube here while you do that. There's Bill Ricker. Still
Will
listening.
do. I think it might be a data issue. I think at the one end of the paddock where it's busy.
Okay. We got most of that.
And remember, the listeners can't hear us testing Chris's mic off air. So they might be a little confused by us telling Chris,
well,
your mic's not working, your mic's not, because that interview played just fine.
Yeah, that's true. TW says, hit the like button. Yes, if you're watching on YouTube, please do. That always helps. Man, Andy P is excited. Andy P says, but McLaren overriding strategy to create a tire offset. Oh, he's talking about so Lando did sort of what he did in Miami, drop back and then charge in late in the stint. Yep. Andy, I agree with this one. He says, the unexpected thing for me was how fast Max's tires dropped off. I don't know if you were on at the beginning of the show, Andy, but I was commenting on that, and that is unexpected and surprising. It just feels like that they don't have the balance of the car right or something, whatever's causing that, because his tires were just a disaster. Yeah, Todd Daubert.
Well, there was a flurry of stories this week about how Red Bull, seemed to be at the end of their rope technically, that this car could not be developed much farther. And that may be indicative that they have been taking so much out of the tire to provide the performance that they need in this much more competitive environment in 2024. That, what we're seeing is just evidence of the fact that the tires are giving all that they can give, and there's nothing more to come from the car. And so they're, suffering is probably the right word. Anybody would be glad to have their results.
Yep, here we go.
I'm George Russell, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
Welcome back to Speed City. George Russell brought us back, finishing 7th today, did Mr. Russell, down 3 positions from qualifying, and just ahead of his teammate.
Yeah, that has to be a disappointment for George Russell.
Yeah.
That has to be a disappointment for Russell. I think, he stood, based on recent performance, including that win that he was DQ'd from in Spa for being, this much underweight. I would have thought he expected more out of the car today.
Yeah, I would think so too. Let's check in with Chris Medland in Zandfoort. Mm-hmm. Chris, you agree with Bob's assessment there?
I do. Certainly. Sorry, I hope I stay with you. I expected more, especially when it looked much more encouraging.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're still losing your connection a little bit, Chris. It's just a weird lose every few syllables there. But one team we haven't talked about is Aston Martin. We touched on the fact that Alonso finished 10th and Lance Stroll finished 13th. Bob, what's your assessment of that? I mean, look, you got to be glad to get any point, but right now, I guess this is kind of where Aston Martin is, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. Their chosen path in terms of the technology of the car is not working out as well as they had hoped. I think Fernando's performance was pretty much what he would tell you he expected, given qualifying where he was 7th, as I recall. I kind of expected more out of Lance Stroll, though, because, as I said, running down the grid in the pre-race show, he looked like he had, speed in hand, that he could have easily qualified right there with his teammate. and wound up starting next to him, but only because other cars were penalized for one infraction or another. So, yeah, it's a little bit disappointing that Lance couldn't have squeezed a bit more out of the Aston Martin.
Yeah, and it's it seems like that's where Lance is these days. It's like he has. It seems like he's doing just enough to not be. I know that his dad owns the team, but still, at some point, the performance has got to be a point where you say, I got to do what's best for the team. But he keeps doing just enough to do that, right? It's just enough to keep the seat, is what it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, he finished behind Ricardo and Hülkenberg, and you would think he would be able to handle those two at least, and join his teammate up in 9th or 10th or so on. Having said that, congrats to Pierre Gasly and Alpine, who did a great job to finish where they did, given they started at 10th, and they picked up 2 points today. To a team like Alpine, that's very important, especially on the debut of their new team principal. And they'll have a little spring in their step going forward. Look, I realize everybody has to finish somewhere, but at least we can speculate that we thought someone had a little bit more speed than they showed in the race, and I think Lance Stroll is probably one of those.
Yep. Chris was tweeting earlier, and he tweeted about Lewis Hamilton trying to get fastest lap on the final lap of the race, and he did a great job and had to put in a fantastic lap time, but unfortunately he was trying to beat Lando Norris, who was doing exactly the same thing, and so Lando took it by 0.071 on the final lap. He was
on used hard tires to the softs that Hamilton was using on the Mercedes. That's impressive.
That is the stat I was going to bring up, and you're absolutely right. That is impressive. And I mean, admittedly, Hamilton's tires, he had almost double. Lando had almost double the laps. He had 44 to 24 for Hamilton, but softs versus hards, that's amazing, honestly.
Yeah, right.
That Lando was able
the
to
hard
pull that
Pirelli
off.
tire. That tire doesn't get to jump into the spotlight very often. Usually the hard is sort of an, let's just get on it and stay on it as long as we can, see if we can outlast everybody else. But I mean, that tire was a goer today. That thing was hot at the race.
Yeah. Man, when I was watching Piastri coming back, I really thought that we could easily end up with a 2 McLarens on the podium, if not a 1-2. And I know we talked about it earlier in the show, but I just was really surprised that he couldn't pull that off. I mean, at the pace that he was going and looking at Lando, I kind of thought that he would be able to pull that off, Bob.
Well, I think he probably thought so too. And I guess in the fullness of time, we'll learn more about what may have held him back a bit. But yeah, I think he should have done a little bit more today. It's more and more evidence that this second half, not quite second half, the next 9 races are going to be really fun and interesting because there's so much at stake and so much competition. It's going to be cool.
Yeah, I know. And it's amazing that to me, I don't know about you, even after the summer break, I'm like, wow, we only have 9 races left, including 2 here in the United States, ladies and gentlemen. That is exciting. And we'll be at both of those races. Of course, I'm here in Austin, and Bob will be here for that, and then headed off to Vegas after that. So I am pretty pumped up about both Austin and Vegas. Bob, how about you?
Oh, absolutely. Plus, Mexico and Sao Paulo, Brazil are both, in very accessible time slots for fans here in the United States. So, yeah, the best is yet to come for the American Formula One fans.
Hey, I want to go back to something. I was looking at my notes from the pre-show, and Chris Medland interviewed Zak Brown. And did you hear Zak drop the Senna-esque statement talking about Lando's qualifying?
No, I didn't hear that, but Zak is certainly entitled to say it. And yeah, I think it's probably appropriate. I mean, when you beat a proven entity like Max Verstappen in Red Bull by as much as Lando beat him by, a third of a second, while everybody behind was within a tenth of a second of each other, that's some really good race driving. And I would agree, probably Senna-esque in its way, because that's the kind of thing the great Brazilian was famous for, was sitting in the pit lane and watching people go, setting a time that nobody could touch, and then going out again just because, to see if he could improve on his own time. And yeah, it was definitely appointment viewing back in the day when Senna was in the field in that McLaren Honda in the late 80s. So just one of the many reasons we missed the triple world champion from Brazil, because boy, oh boy, he could pull one out.
Appointment viewing, or must-see TV, as they said in the 90s. Bob, I'm looking at constructor standings, right? So it's now narrowed down to 31 points, as we mentioned earlier. Red Bull at the top still, McLaren chasing them down. But
30.
Yeah, on the F1.com right now, you're right, it is 30. That's weird.
Yeah.
Ferrari right behind, really, with a good day for Ferrari. They're only 34 points behind because, you had, like we said, we had Carlos Sainz fifth, Charles Leclerc in third. So Ferrari only 34 points. They just kind of keep hanging in there. They've just been just below the radar, right? Not off the radar, but just seems like just enough to stay in this hunt. And, I don't really expect them to be able to catch McLaren, but do you think possibly that Ferrari could even catch Red Bull? That's something we hadn't talked about, is it?
Well, maybe anything's possible, but the track's coming up. You've got Monza, you've got Baku in Azerbaijan, you've got Singapore, where Carlos Sainz won last year with a masterful performance. Ferrari has a lot to look forward to in these last 9 races of the season. And if Red Bull truly is at the end of their development cycle on this car and can't get any more out of it, they may find themselves feeling the hot breath of McLaren and Ferrari. And who knows? I mean, Mercedes could very well get back in it. I think their car is much more suited to specific track environments than, say, the McLaren, which seems to be great just everywhere. So, yeah, that's why I say I think the best is yet to come in these last 9.
Yeah, and look, I just brought it up because I'm thinking, the math. If Checo does what he did today and gets himself into the the upper half of the the field here at 6, then that's going to be hard for Ferrari. But
yeah,
hey, I saw a question out on Twitter. Was this Logan's last F1 race? We touched on this in the pre-show. I think my answer to that would be I think it's, I don't know. I'd say it's probably not his last F1 race, but I think it's possible. I'm just running through some questions I saw there. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, as Chris said in the pre-race show, the team is asking around, Williams is, about the availability of other drivers. I mean, obviously, you want to put somebody in there who has experience, who can, you don't want another guy with, the barely out of his rookie season the way Logan Sargent is. But Monza's next week, and that's a very short time frame. Now, after that, we've got a break before Baku.
Yeah.
And if there's going to be a change coming, it would be then. But I would expect to see Logan in the car at least for Monza. After that, who knows? It kind of depends, as Chris said, on who's available. If you're going to change, you better improve.
Yeah, because you could have a lot. There's just a lot of names that they're talking about are also inexperienced drivers, so you just don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
Going back to the constructor standings, behind Ferrari at 370 is Mercedes at 276, so no threat there. And then, of course, it drops off to the midfield, as I call them, Aston Martin. They're in a no man's land by themselves at 74 points. And then RB at 34. Would they get a point today? Let's see. Yeah, no, they did not. They did not get a point today. I was thinking it was Alonso, but right behind them is Haas and 27, and Hulkenberg was 11th today. And Hulkenberg had those two P6s back to back early in the year, which is really what put Haas where they are right now, in a solid seventh ahead of Alpine. But like you said, Alpine got some points today, so that gap is 27 to 13, 14 points. I'd say that they could be in danger. Haas could be in danger from the Alpine team if they don't score some more points.
And we need to keep in mind too that just because you don't score points doesn't mean you haven't done your team some good in the standings, because in the event of a tie in points, the position in the constructors goes to the team with the best non-scoring finishes. So in that sense, you get a point for 10th place. For 11th, you don't get anything, but that's the best non-scoring finish you can have. So, Nico Hulkenberg finishing 11th, could become a factor by the end of the season, worth millions of dollars to the teams in prize money.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, Williams after Alpine had only 4 points, but Sauber, wow. A big goose egg. And again, today finishing second to last and last.
Yeah, that's they are curious. I mean, Sauber has a pretty proud tradition going back to the founding of the team itself, and they've had great drivers over many years. But boy, oh boy, with the recent turmoil, Andrea Seidel being dismissed, taking the two top guys out of the team and replacing them, it smacks of desperation. It's another full season before the team becomes the official Audi factory entry. But boy, you got to wonder what's going on there in Hinwil, Switzerland, where the team is based. It's curious. I mean, we know who Valtteri Bottas is and what he can do with all the races he won as the sidekick to Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes all those years. It's curious.
Yeah, it's curious
why they can't score a point.
Yeah, and we need to get Chris to. We haven't really. I don't know if we've talked to anybody from that team recently. I just kind of wonder what the vibe and the mood is down there. Can't be good, right? I mean, it's just got to be disheartening, no matter what your future plans are.
So.
Are we all looking to the future and just ignoring the year? I mean, look, with 9 races left and no points, of course, they're only 4 points behind. Maybe we need a rainstorm or something crazy to help them get some points. But Chris.
Well, we're getting into that time of the season.
And what do you mean?
Well, it's late in the season. You have to make a hard decision about what resources are you putting into the car now to try to improve it, and maybe move up a position or two in the constructors, or do you put those resources toward next year's car and try to get a jump on 2025? And one by one, the teams are going to have to make that decision. We know what the guys in the thick of the battle are going to do. They're going to keep fighting. But for teams like Sauber and RB and Haas, they have some decisions to make that could be pretty significant to their effort next year.
Yeah. Chris Medland did catch up with Zak Brown, but we'll just get a break in, and then we'll come back and hear from McLaren boss Zak Brown after their big win today. All right, still live on YouTube. Let's see what's going on out there. Let's see. I love this, Joe of Oyster Bay. Why couldn't I think of this brilliant line? Because it is. Lance is on his own cosmic rhythm. He rarely makes sense. Yeah, he is absolutely.
His own cosmic rhythm.
I like that.
Boy.
Yeah, because he is. His interviews average about 7 seconds, something like that.
Right.
Andy P, the thing going against
dude.
Yeah. Andy P, the thing going against Logan Sargent is that all of F3 and F2 will be in Monza anyway. Ooh, yeah, good point. So Williams will have their pick of anyone if they want to make a change. That's true. I still think it's a long shot, but the thing against Lawson.
Yeah. Well, where's Theo Pourchaire? What's he doing right now? I mean, there's an F2 champion.
Yeah.
Who's kind of twiddling his thumbs right now. I mean, it's fun to speculate. We can talk about that next week, but assuming nothing happens.
Yep. Todd Dauber says the thing against Lawson is that Voles has said he wants a driver that will stay with them. Yeah, good point. And we know that he's got those ties to Red Bull. And Helmut Marko's claiming that Lawson is going to be in a Red Bull team car of some sort, Red Bull or RB next year. So that's a good point. The Wood Source, he says.
Yeah, I raised that point in the.
Go ahead.
I mentioned that yesterday, and Chris kind of shot me down. He said, well, yes and no. He said, yeah, they promised him a seat. They didn't promise it would be in an RB or a Red Bull, but they would at least, to keep their options on him, they have to provide him a seat. So he will definitely go somewhere. So there's a possibility there, I suppose, theoretically, with Sauber.
Yep.
This is David Hobbs, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, welcome back, and thanks for sticking with us. And we have a word from a sponsor, because I'm really excited, because where will you be next Sunday? Labor Day weekend? I know we're going to be at Circuit of the Americas for the Lone Star Le Mans. And really excited for this, Bob. There's going to be a ton of OEMs there, all the different teams from Alpine, Aston Martin, BMW, Cadillac, Corvette, Ferrari, Ford, Lamborghini, Lexus, McLaren, Peugeot, Porsche, Toyota. Formula One world champion Jenson Button will be driving, and 7-time MotoGP world champion Valentino Rossi are all the drivers are going to be lined up on the grid. And support races, the Lamborghini Super Trofeo and the Ford Mustang Challenge. That's been fun to watch, hasn't it, Bob? The Ford Mustangs this year.
Oh, absolutely. Great to see Ford getting more aggressive with their racing programs by instituting a single make series like that. The Lamborghinis are just fabulous cars. They look like doorstops, big, booming 10-cylinder engines, great fun to watch. And, you can't beat the WEC right now with all of the, 18 hypercars will be in that race. I'll be interested to see if any of the domestic IMSA cars decide to, step a toe in the water, since it's basically a home game for them. And of course, the GTs are just fabulous.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and having all of these manufacturers, if you go to that race and you drive your fun car, the chances are, with the list I just read off, that you're going to be seeing a car that looks very similar to yours out on the racetrack. And they have a huge fan zone, lots of car displays, entertainment. It's really going to be cool. You can see all the action at Circuit of the Americas this coming Labor Day weekend, starting on Friday, August 30th, culminating with the Lone Star Le Mans on Sunday, September 1st. We'll hope to see you there. All right. Well, when we went to break, we said that Chris Medland had grabbed an interview with Zak Brown, and I'm really excited to hear how excited he is after such a huge win by Lando Norris today. Let's hear from Zak Brown and Chris Medland.
Zak, what are you wearing?
A gift from the Zandvoort circuit, which apparently you get if you win the race, because some people went, that's a bit presumptuous for you to have that made. And I was like, no, I didn't quite have that made, but I'm happy to wear it. Wear it to work on Monday.
It's an orange cape, I can tell everyone, that says Zandvoort on it and says, winning team Dutch Grand Prix 2024. Lovely.
That was good. That was a good day at the office. That was an impressive performance by everybody. Lando was perfect. Team strategy. The pace of the car. Oscar, shame we didn't get him on the podium, because I think he definitely had the pace for that, but just couldn't quite not be in dirty air. Up on Russell early on, and then, of course, Charles at the end, but they did a great job, so good day at the office.
I mean, you won by the 20 seconds. That was Red Bull-esque when Max disappears into the distance. Did you know that was in the car?
I thought we had great pace. 23 seconds or whatever it was. No, I didn't think it was going to be that, but that was great to see.
Well, dare I be the guy that revs it up too much, but after a result like that, a performance like that, a margin of victory like that, do you start thinking, yeah, we can get to these guys in the championship?
Yeah, we've thought that for a few races, but it's going to take a while. We've got to keep doing what we're doing, and it's going to be tight, but it's game on.
Different test in Monza. Can the car be quick there too?
I think so. You never quite know what everyone else is going to do, but we've got our Monza tricks up our sleeves, so hopefully they work like the rest of the upgrades that all the men and women at McLaren have been putting on this race car for the last couple of years.
Well, I look forward to seeing the Cape in Monza as well. So well done today.
Thank you.
That's brilliant. A cape. He said he's going to wear it to work on Monday.
Wow. The Phantom of Zandvoort.
Yeah. He's got the slick back hair for it. We have to dye it black. Hey, I have a really interesting question for you, Mr. Bob Varsha. And I stole this one off the interwebs. Do you think that Max Verstappen will win another race this season? Interesting question, right? I mean, the fact that you didn't just immediately spit that out, you know?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about the races still to come.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to struggle. He's certainly not going to win all of them. And it wasn't that long ago where that would be the safe bet. No, but I think he'll win again. I mean, look at us. Where are we now? When you got a guy who's had the success of 3 straight world championships and all of those poles and all of those victories. And now, since he hasn't won in 5 races or so, we're wondering, will Max ever win again? Of course he will.
He's washed up.
Too much brain power. Right, exactly. Although I did think it was interesting when Max said, I'm closer to the end of my career than the beginning. I mean, the guy's 26 years old, for crying out loud.
He's been saying
Go
that.
Talk to Fernando Alonso. Yeah.
He's been saying that since last season at some point. Bob, I have to admit, when I asked the question and you didn't respond, and you were looking quite, what's the phrase the kids say these days? Demure and thoughtful.
Demure. Pensive is what I'll
You're
go
right.
with.
You're right. But I had to get a demure and thoughtful in because apparently that's running all over the internet, and hopefully somebody will stop me first of all. But somebody will tweet what that at us or comment in YouTube about what that's all about because I think some YouTuber, some influencer started using it. So anyway, but yes, you were.
Yeah, it's funny how we lean on words like in racing. Flawless is one that suddenly swept the table. Oh, the crew performed flawlessly. The car was flawless. But I mean, most of these guys are lucky to graduate high school, and now they're using words like flawless. Come on. Yeah. But what I'm trying to figure out is I know Max is going to win a race, or I think he is. But where? What's the most appropriate track for Max to win at again?
Yeah, good question. Which track?
Where would it be?
You're better than me because I'm gonna cheat and look at the schedule because I can't put it all in my head.
Well,
that's a good point. So we got obviously
it's always
Monza.
been tough at Brazil.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Monza, Azerbaijan, Singapore, Coda, Mexico, Brazil, Vegas, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi. Geez. Honestly, I'm thinking about Coda possibly. The technicality.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it is a very interesting question. Chris Medland has just sent in an interview. He sent in a report. Okay, he's recorded a little segment. Let's hear what Chris has. He said he's got a bit of news. Let's hear from Chris Medland.
Well, I'm just waiting to speak to Christian Horner in the Red Bull Hospitality Unit, which is why I've had to disappear from the dropping out audio, but you can get this one much more consistently, hopefully. And I thought I'd give you guys a talking point. A bit of news has come out from Toto Wolff, which was very much expected, I must admit, but he's finally confirmed that Andrea Kimi Antonelli will be taking part in FP1 at Monza on Friday. So the Mercedes youngster that's so heavily tipped to get that race seat and replace Lewis Hamilton is going to be in the car at Monza, and that will be his first FP1 outing. He only turned 18 today, so it's the only real first opportunity to properly put him in the car. So Antonelli's going to be appearing next weekend. Wolff has confirmed that, so we'll get our first look at him in current F1 machinery.
That's it's like the worst kept secret, right?
Yeah, and you got to feel for the kid. I mean, he just turned 18. There's been so much talk and speculation about what he's going to do. He's probably the most highly touted junior driver to ascend to Formula One since Charles Leclerc, perhaps.
Yeah.
So he's going to be under a lot of scrutiny, a lot of pressure. I don't envy. Well, of course I do envy him, but good luck to him. You know, Monza is a special place.
I'm glad you said that. Good luck to him, because like you, I'm sure I always have, you always want the best for somebody, right? I mean, especially when they're just coming in, you always, I say it that way because, typically that means somebody else is not getting that seat. But, if somebody gets it and they earned it, which he has, and I'm just excited to see how he'll do, though. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, it's great to see young blood, see new guys coming in. If we're going to have Liam Lawson next year, we're going to have Jack Doohan next year. That's exciting stuff.
Yep. Let's look at the driver standings. Max Verstappen now 295. Lando Norris has narrowed the gap by 8 points to 70 points, so it's 225 for Lando. And like we talked about earlier, at the pace where Max keeps scoring right behind Lando, that's probably going to be Max's championship at the end. Behind Lando is Charles Leclerc at 192, and then followed by Oscar Piastri at 179. I think that could easily be a position that, I shouldn't say easily be. I'd say that's one that we could watch, right? Oscar catching Charles Leclerc because of the speed of the McLaren. So, and then right behind Piastri is 172 to Carlos Sainz. So that gap is really tight. And we'll come back to these driver standings because Chris Medland just sent in an interview. I want to make sure we get this in with Christian Horner. He's got several minutes with Christian. So let's hear that.
Christian, thanks for giving us your time. I know you'll have to get yourself to the airport and back to the factory, I'm sure, pretty quickly after what I imagine was a case of maybe a bittersweet result. You got second place, points-wise, solid return on a weekend where it looked like McLaren were in a league of their own.
Yeah, McLaren were very quick today, so congrats to them and to Lando. They showed us a clean pair of heels, but we managed damage limitation by getting that second place. We've got a load of data to look at. We've run different specs between the two cars, so we know we've got a lot to do. But I thought Max drove a good race to, if he couldn't win it, make sure that his second best today, and he managed that.
Yeah, the gap was only 2.5 seconds to Leclerc at the flag, and obviously Piastri was quick in the McLaren too. So was there a real threat that you might not have even been able to finish second if you hadn't played it right today?
You never know. I mean, it was quite a strange race where different cars at different points in time were going quick. And I mean, if you look at Checo's pace in the last 10 laps, again, he was showing very strong pace there. I think he did a 14.5. Where Max was only able to do a 15.0 at that point in time. So I think we've got a lot of info that's been really useful. And now, of course, the most important thing is how you use the info, how you use the data, how you affect change.
Yeah, you say that. As I understand it, you had some old spec parts on the car, which still clearly perform well to have a podium. But how far back did you have to go to learn about this car, and how quickly can you respond from this point with 9 races to go?
Well, sometimes you've got to take one step backwards to go 2 steps forwards, and I think we've learned quite a lot today.
Okay, and then you mentioned Checo there. Pretty solid drive from him as well. Was that just kind of what you were looking for after the summer break?
I think it was important for him. I thought he drove a solid Grand Prix today. He got the most out of it that he could. Obviously good for him to get the points and hopefully give him a bit of confidence heading into Monza.
Yeah, Monza next weekend. It's been a long time since we've seen anyone except Max Verstappen and Red Bull win a race in the way that Lando Norris did today. Yeah. Zak Brown said it's game on in the championship. He knows it's a long way to come back, but that he feels that with that performance they can. Do you believe that too?
But look, I mean, they had a hell of an advantage today, so you can't ignore that. And we always treat things, race by race. So the constructors, we're very vulnerable. The drivers, whilst we have a strong lead, it can diminish pretty quickly. So we don't take anything for granted. the final 9 races are going to be, all on.
And confident in your Monza package, though, because it's a very different setup, isn't it, this weekend?
It's chalk and cheese. We're going from the highest one, our highest downforce setting to our lowest downforce setting. So that's going to be interesting, and a brand new track surface there that could be quite interesting as well.
And we look forward to seeing it all play out. See you soon.
All right, thank you.
Oh, great stuff, Chris. And Chris Medland, we got you now. Are you connected on Wi-Fi?
I believe I am, yes. Well, I definitely am. So hopefully you can hear me.
We can hear you perfectly. Perfectly. Thank you, sir. What's going on with Haas?
Glad you asked, because I'm right next door to them. And I know we don't have long, but it won't take long to say that they're not going anywhere tonight.
Oh,
really?
So the team has made the payments they needed to make. But as I think I mentioned on the pre-race show, they were waiting to have an update in terms of the receipt of that payment. And they have been told to wait for confirmation of receipt of payment tomorrow. That they actually sent it on Friday. And once it's acknowledged tomorrow, then they'll immediately be on their way to Italy. So they'll get themselves ready, but they can't go anywhere.
Chris,
wow.
And Bob, you know how bankers are. I mean, you skip Monday, Friday afternoon, they leave the office early, and then Monday they probably don't show up till later. So no telling when that will get taken care of. Hey, Chris, it sounds like it's just literally just administrative confirmation of the funds transfer, because it's probably done by wire, like you're saying, and it's probably a technical thing that they'll just go work through, administrative, but still a little scary, right?
Yeah, that's exactly how it's been kind of explained to me by the team, as Gene Haas actually just walked by to head back to the hospitality unit, and he is not keen to talk. I can tell you that. I tried to catch his eye earlier, and he was like, no. Partly, I imagine, because but he might need to think about what he says, or be careful about what he says. Yes, it does seem to be they're literally waiting on one receipt to reach them. So I believe they were looking for clarity on whether they could go anyway, because they knew they'd paid, and that proof of payment from their end would be enough for them to head to Monza. But I think it's just being on the safe side now. It's like, no, how embarrassing would it look if you did get properly stopped at the border because you were told, actually, this hasn't gone through yet. So as far as they're concerned, it was all sorted on Friday. They're just waiting for that receipt to come through.
And arranging a police escort to the border to get there as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
It's all right for some, isn't it? I mean, even the team bosses have all been doing that now. So we managed to get a few of them. Sadly, I didn't get Toto Wolff directly because he's shooting off. I was going to try and get Ayo Komatsu to explain all of this, but he's in debrief. And then I'm told it's straight to the airport from the debrief truck. A lot of them love to get back, but this is the thing with the back-to-backs. And when you're a team that maybe isn't flying, I imagine it's going to be a little bit different with Zak Brown. You hear how upbeat he was. He maybe won't rush off quite as quickly. He'll be with the team doing celebratory photos, probably doing good calls with sponsors and partners. But when you've got a lot of work to do, you get yourself straight back to the factory. As Gunther Steiner knows all too well, don't you, Gunther? You go straight back to the factory at this point when you get back to work for Monday morning.
No, I'm gonna do nothing on Monday. My day is finished here. I'm happy now. I don't have any headaches anymore.
But that's what team bosses do. We only have like 30 seconds after the show. But when you are looking after a team, you have to move fast.
Absolutely, because the problems start now when you're on a team. Not the problems, the work starts now, because you have to analyze the race and work for the next one. So it's that's what you have to do. It's relentless. When you're running a team, but even the engineers, everybody who is involved in the sport and actively. Now the work starts for the next race. There's no downtime.
Same for us. We do the reaction for this, and then we head to the next one. I hope you do enjoy some downtime, though, after your weekend. Thank you very much, Gunther. He's off into Pirelli, who are supplying this Wi-Fi.
I was just going to say, I know exactly where you are. You're at the Pirelli hospitality, because that's Gunther's office, I think, when he's on the road. So, all right, correct, guys.
Yeah.
We are out of time. Thank you, Chris Medland. Thank you, Bob Varsha. But don't forget, we have Wheel to Wheel coming up on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Channel 81. And, of course, next Sunday, we'll be back with you with all the coverage from Monza. Thanks for tuning in. Talk to you next week.